So, hello everybody, and welcome everyone to the Buddhist Recovery Network Academy. I'm Susanna, and I'm joining you from Helsinki, Finland, and I will be your host today. I'm a big fan of Buddhism, recovery, and Buddhist recovery. I facilitate both 8-step recovery meetings and mindfulness-based addiction recovery courses in Finland. I'm a member of the board of the Buddhist Recovery Network. So we have Kevin Griffin tonight again. It's so nice to have you for the second time this year because you were here the first. Just seems like a while ago. Time has passed very fast. And the topic of the teaching today will be long enduring mind. Thanks for everybody for being here and being part of our community today. And then a few words about Dharma. All of our teachings are given freely, and we are blessed with some amazing teachers like Kevin, who have experience on the cushion, experience working with the body, speech, and mind, experience in the ongoing practice of recovery by the way of Dharma. As we practice the Buddha's teaching of generosity, we invite you to give dana that will be given to support our ongoing Buddhist Recovery Network meetings and to support the teacher. You can give on a one-time or recurring basis using the link posted in the chat field. Please be sure to indicate that your donation is for the Academy, and we sincerely thank you for your generosity. BRN, thanks for the question, Laura, in the chat field. BRN is Buddhist Recovery Network. Refuge Recovery is one meeting type under the umbrella of our Buddhist Recovery Network. Okay, so let's get to the main business for today. I'd like to introduce our guest teacher. Kevin Griffin is a Buddhist teacher and author, best known for his work integrating Dharma and recovery. He's a co-founder of Buddhist Recovery Network and the author of several books, including One Breath at a Time, Buddhism and the 12 Steps. That's the book I started with, and quite a few of us have started with that book. He has been practicing insight meditation for over 40 years and teaching since the late 1990s. His recovery dates from 1985. He has taught in a wide range of settings, including Esalen, Kripalu and Omega Institute, diverse Buddhist centers, academic and research institutions, treatment centers, rehabs, and prisons. His latest book is Lovingkindness, Metta Teachings for the whole of our lives, an exploration of the broad meaning and purpose of the Buddha's teaching on loving kindness. His interest in the suttas of the Pali Canon is now a prime source of study and teachings. And as said before, the topic of teaching is long enduring mind. And this is what Kevin says about it. Recovery and Dharma practice go through many ups and downs. How do we sustain our spiritual lives through the seasons of life? So welcome, Kevin. It's always a pleasure to have you back with us.
Thanks, Susanna. So nice to see you. Thank you. Anybody who was able to sit through that entire bio deserves a reward. I'm sorry. I was like, oh God, this goes on forever. Who cares? Let's get to the good stuff. Really nice to see everybody. Fun scrolling through and just seeing a lot of friends here. Some people I haven't seen in a while. And you know, as much as, you know, I think we have a love, I don't know how you guys are, but I think a bit of a love-hate relationship with Zoom. It's like, oh man, another Zoom meeting. But then it's like, oh, there's so-and-so, you know, and I wouldn't be able to see them unless I flew somewhere. So thank you for coming, for showing up. And once again, I just really want to thank the Buddhist Recovery Network and particularly all the board members who have kept it running and really have brought it into this era of thriving. We started the organization 15 years ago, 2008, and really stumbled along for many years, not really finding our I don't know, our purpose, all the people who kept it going are important. But I think Vimalasara really kind of brought it into this era of real connection and international connection. So it's beautiful to see that through the long enduring process of just sticking with it, even when it didn't seem like it was going anywhere, that it's really flowering now. So let's just start with a few minutes of meditation. We only have about an hour, so we're going to have to meditate quickly. When you figure out how to do that, you can tell me. So just settling into the body. You can close your eyes, take your eyes away from the screen for a little while. And if you're not comfortable with your eyes closed, just lower your gaze so that the attention turns inward. Feeling the movement of breath. And just checking in with yourself right now. What's your mood like? What are you bringing with you to this moment, to this day? Just knowing that each of us is in the middle of our life, and it's very important to each of us to maybe step back from that for a moment and we'll see that it's just life. The story we tell is just a story. There is breathing, there is feeling, there are thoughts.
You and your phone.
And there's just this existence in this moment. And so we let go of the past and the future. Just arrive here. With this present moment experience. Where does the mind go when you don't direct it somewhere. When it's unleashed, what habits of mind are revealed. Those places that seem to pull us in. And again, just letting go and letting the body soften, letting the mind soften. All right. A bit of a shorter sit this morning, just because we don't have a lot of time. And that reminds me, just to let you know, if you're interested in just hanging out, I do some regular classes on Zoom. So I'm just going to put the link to that page on my website in the chat. I'm also, not to turn this into a promotional event, but I'm also doing a course on 4 Noble Truths of Recovery for the Barry Center for Buddhist Studies. I don't see the link anyway. So I want to. So this idea of a long enduring mind is something that's appealed to me. It's kind of I think it's a Zen expression. It has that kind of poetic sound of Zen. And when I started to practice in the fall of 1980, I took a course, a weekly class at the International Buddhist Meditation Center in Los Angeles with a monk named Akasa, who had just come back from 8 years in Sri Lanka. And they had a beautiful meditation hall. It was kind of had a Japanese kind of style, tatami mats, and I had my zafu, and we would sit in rows. It was a very small group, just a few of us, and a casa would come in at the beginning of the evening with a cassette player, and he would put it down there on the dais and stick in a tape from Stephen Levine giving a guided meditation, and then he'd leave. And it would be 45 minutes, and I was sitting with my legs crossed and I was at that point 30 years old, and I should have been fairly flexible. I wasn't particularly, but after about 15 or 20 minutes, my knees would start to burn and my head would be wandering and I would be going crazy, and I'd be like, when is all this freaking tape, God, when's this thing going to end? How long is this going to go? But it was like, I'm gonna stick with it because I'm gonna get enlightened. This is gonna fix my life. Everything's gonna get solved if I can just meditate long enough. And that went on through the fall, and then Akasa put on a Thanksgiving retreat from Wednesday night to Sunday afternoon, and I finally, after a lot of back and forth, I signed up for that because I knew that if I could just stick it out for that week, that long retreat, that everything was going to change. And I was going to just have this bliss experience, and my meditation would be beautiful. And so I went on that retreat, and it was just difficult. It was torturous. Every sit was like the ones at this International Buddhist Center, the knees burning, just waiting for the bell. But, I'm going to get through this because I'm going to get something from it. And, finally the retreat ends and I go home and I just cried for a week. There was no bliss. I just was crying every day. And I was like, what the hell is going on? I got to get this thing figured out. So the following spring, I went on a 3-week retreat because 3 weeks, this is going to do it. The following fall, it was 3 months. And every time I was disappointed because I didn't get fixed. And in fact, it was, 6 months after that 3-month retreat, I gave up on Buddhism and went off with this homeless guru who promised I would become enlightened in 6 months if I just lived on faith with him. I made it 2 months before, just bailing out, because living on the street and living on faith didn't really work out too well. And I wasn't getting enlightened. And I wound up homeless, and after a couple of months of couch surfing, I spent the winter sleeping in a Volkswagen bus van. I couldn't live in it because my friends needed to drive to work during the day, but they let me sleep in it at night. All of these actions, but really the motivation behind all of them was this impatience to get it immediately. I needed to get fixed now. The idea of a long-term practice or process was just unimaginable for me. I couldn't see how something like that it had to happen quickly. And wasn't enlightenment something supposed to happen fast? Like a sudden bolt of lightning, right? And it was a few years before I got sober, and a couple of years of sobriety before I just finally stopped. I stopped running, I stopped chasing, and it's ironic in a way that, here I'd been doing this Buddhist thing that was about being present, but it was really only when I got sober that I started to live like that, and just to appreciate today, and of course, one day at a time, So there was this pressing quality. And, even when I went back to school, and this is a moment that I think it was very much kind of spoke to this for me. But when I started to think about going back to school at 3 years sober, and I said to my sponsor, but, it's going to take 4 years, which is like typical of that thinking, like, yeah, like, okay. And his response was, yeah, in 4 years, you're going to be 4 years older, and you can either have a degree or not have a degree. And, and that was the beginning of my sort of thinking, oh, maybe I should just like have a longer view, right? This longer view. And, at 10 years sober, I finished my master's degree. And, 10 years sober is a big mark, right? It's a time like, when you hit that, you're like, you've accomplished something. There was a meeting that in Santa Monica where you could go to the meeting, but if you didn't have 10 years sober, you weren't allowed to speak. A little bit, I don't know if that's really appropriate, but I get it, and so 10 years sober meant a lot to me. I graduated, I've got my master's degree. I had written 2 novels in that time. Neither of them got published. I graduated. I moved in with my girlfriend, who didn't really want me living there. I didn't have a job. And after a little while, like about a week, I realized, oh shit, like this is really bad. What did I do? And I went and I got a temp job, I was like, okay. And I mean, for a little while I was upset, but quickly I just realized, oh, this is just this. And that's why like this idea of the seasons of our life, has become a theme for me, that our lives go through these different stages. And instead of, feeling like we're trapped in some situation, we can step back and see, oh, this is the season that I'm in right now. At one point before I was a teacher, I was facilitating a Kalyana Metta group, which is a sort of Buddhist support group, basically a small group. And there was a young woman in that group who was a single mother. She had a 6-year-old boy, and she was in nursing school. And she came to me one day and said, I feel like my practice is really lacking these days because I can't go on retreats. And I said, you're taking care of a 6-year-old as a single parent, which means you're practicing loving kindness in the deepest way every day. You're going to nursing school to develop a career in service. So you're cultivating right livelihood in a very serious way. Well, that's your practice. Someday you'll come back and you'll go on retreats when you have time for that, when it's time for that, when it's that season. Right now, you're in the season of love and livelihood. Well, that's beautiful. It's a gift. I mean, for me, for sure, going to school was a gift, right? You're in school and all you're thinking about is, oh, I need to graduate. Don't forget, like you're having this great experience. I get to teach. There's a mindfulness club at UC Berkeley, and I've been sort of a visiting teacher with them over the years. And I go there and I try to really remind them, like, this is it right here. This is like graduating isn't where you're trying to get to. This is it right here. This is the beautiful time, as I was reflecting on this talk this morning, as often happens to my mind, because I'm a musician and listen to too much music, a song came to mind. And I was like, oh, that is such a corny song. It's Carly Simon's song, Anticipation, because it has a line in it, which is really a bad line. These are the good old days. I mean, that's a terrible line. It's just so corny. But, there it is. It's like, you're right. Yeah. It's a really good reflection. It's just like not a very good song lyric. And so, of course, I went up to make breakfast and I was, okay, let me put that song on. And I was like, it started playing and my heart just kind of opened up. It's like, oh, this is so pretty, but it's terrible. No, but it's really beautiful. Very typical conflict for an aging person who, still clinging to old ideas. But yeah, to be able to appreciate whatever it is, whatever this time in our life is, and be with it. When I see people with young children, very often, and I really watch the parents if you pass them on the street, pushing a stroller, I look at their faces a lot, and just to see how they're taking in that moment, because it's really difficult to raise small children. And we know that over the pandemic, it was just really, really tough for people. But, some people I'll see that there's joy there, even though the kid is screaming or whatever, it's like they're dealing with some stuff, there's still joy. And then other people I'll see, like their jaw will be set and they'll be kind of like, ugh, I got to get through this, get the kid home and get him, put him down for a nap so I can get some me time, And yeah. And when they grow up, these are the times you're going to miss more than anything, right? So this is always the question to me. What is it? What's happening right now that I can appreciate? Because this is all there is. And so the long enduring mind is the mind that's present. It's not the mind that's out in the future or in the past. The richness of it is this present moment. But it is really, really helpful to have this big perspective. It's so interesting to me, and I talk about this fairly often, how in recovery, we define success not by what we would say the quality of your recovery, like how much money do you make, or how many friends do you have, or how happy are you even. We define it by how long you've been in recovery, the 10-year thing. I've when I tell people I'm in recovery, one of the first things I say is, oh, I've been sober for this many years. And it's not about pride, right? It's a statement about the long enduring mind, and the power of that. Because we know that no matter what, if you've been alive for a period of time, you've suffered, you've struggled, you've had all kinds of challenges. And if you've stayed sober through that suffering, through those challenges, through that pain, then you have achieved something. It's not something, you get a gold star for, but something has happened, And the same is true for meditation practice. If somebody goes on a retreat, the first thing you ask them is, how long was the retreat? You don't say, did your mind wander? Did you encounter any hindrances? Did you have any bad times? Of course they did. That's part and parcel of the experience. But it's the time. Oh, you sat 3 months? Oh, you sat for a year? You sat for a week? You sat for a day? Whatever, any period of time, right? It's amazing. And it tells us that something has happened. You know, in traditional cultures, elders were held in esteem, you know, because they'd been around for a long time, you know. Nowadays, we don't have that, you know, at least to a great extent in the West. You know, the old people are just people to warehouse and to get out of the way, you know, wait so we can inherit their, you know, whatever's left of their retirement account. But, you know, why are elders held in esteem? Because it's understood that if you live for a long time and you pay attention, that's the important component. If you pay attention and live for a long time, you will develop wisdom. Now, many people do not pay attention, as we know, so they just get old and stupid, you know, God bless them. But, you know, and, you know, get off my lawn kind of people, which actually with the dog next door, I'm often, you know, get off my porch. But anyway, this is where wisdom comes from going through the seasons of life, seeing suffering, seeing the end of suffering, seeing joy, seeing the end of joy, being able to be with all of it, right? This is, of course, the long enduring mind, to be with all of it, all the ups and downs. And this is what our training, particularly our Buddhist training, is meant to cultivate, is this capacity to be with the coming and the going, the rising and the falling, to see it all as natural, as inevitable, as manageable, as okay, as life, as good, you know. You know, when you talk about impermanence, you know, there's this sort of attitude, well, impermanence is a bad thing. Like, you know, I mean, usually people will pull out the impermanence card, you know, when something bad happens. Oh, well, everything is impermanent. But as we like to point out, you know, if things weren't impermanent, that would really be a problem. First of all, if you think overpopulation is a problem now, think about if nobody ever died, we'd really have a problem. I mean, you think death is bad? Well, what would you? So all of this is to see that our task is to come into harmony with these truths, with this reality. And that if we pay attention over time, we will start to see how things are and cultivate wisdom, acceptance, understanding, trust. So our job, you know, maybe is just to see, where am I right now? And what am I resisting about this reality, about this truth, about this moment? And what is in this moment that can be transformed into wisdom through my understanding? Can I shift my perspective? You know, equanimity which is another of the, this is another piece of what we're talking about. Equanimity is kind of the underlying quality in the long enduring mind, right? The mind that neither rushes towards something nor runs away from it, but the mind that sits with things as they are. So to hold things in this way is to hold each moment with love, with appreciation, without fear, with courage, to see it as a gift. I did a self-retreat recently, and I was feeling my heart beating a lot. You know how sometimes when you're meditating, you feel your heart, and it it's a little unnerving. After a few days of it, of noticing that, it occurred to me how small my heart is and how big my body is in relation to my heart. And I just thought, I know nothing about anatomy. I took biology in summer school, the summer that I started smoking marijuana. So didn't retain any of that. Never took any other anatomy courses. So I'm really pretty lame on this. It's amazing that this little muscle is getting blood all through this entire body, like moment by moment, constant, and it keeps moving. And it does it for a pretty long time. Most machines break down faster than 70 or 80 years, repetitive machines that just do the same thing over and over. So it's kind of this miracle. And so just, I put that out as just another way to stop and go, oh, right now, this is amazing. I might be having a really difficult moment, might be painful or disturbing, but there's this amazing, beautiful thing going on that I'm being carried by. I can change my breath. I cannot change my heartbeat. I try sometimes, maybe, certain, but it kind of just does what it does. And I am the benefactor of that. I'm living with that. The long enduring heart, right? Really miraculous. So, it's really just it's just an idea. It's a line. It's I hope an inspiration, just this phrase, the long enduring mind, something we can turn to when we need it. Sometimes long enduring is the 45-minute meditation. Sometimes that's a long time to endure. Sometimes it's, 5 minutes to endure 5 minutes of somebody yelling at you, But it's a vital piece for us in recovery because, relapse is the short enduring mind. It is the mind that cannot tolerate this moment. It doesn't have the equanimity, doesn't have the courage. I don't know, courage, that feels judgmental, but I will say it doesn't have the equanimity and the wisdom, and it's painful. We know, it's not a judgment that we relapse. Relapse is, addiction is a, relapsing condition, but this is what we need. We need this view. We need this view that we can get through this moment, through this breath, through this heartbeat, and through this 5 minutes, this 45 minutes, and this year, and this, this lifetime. And it takes this broad view. So I offer these words for your reflection. And we have time for thoughts or questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. I will thank you at this point, and much gratitude for your wise words again. That was so beautiful. And your way of explaining things in a way that it's simple but still deep. I've always loved that. So now it's time for the Q&A. You can either raise your hand or type your question to the chat. And yeah, and we will start wrapping up about 5:02. So we have some practicalities, and we want to share some links for you as well. So there is the Dius is asking, can you say more about vital peace? Shall we start with that?
I don't know what that means. I mean, the capital V and the capital P. So I'm not sure if it refers to something in particular. So I don't.
Yeah. Do you notice Steve put there, hi, Kevin, can you speak to the long enduring mind in concert with the fourth step? And maybe also if you talk about the fourth step, tell the people, what is the fourth step, because not everybody knows.
I should never have opened this up for questions. This is much too difficult. Let's see. So the fourth step in the 12 steps is we made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. And it's a looking back and a reflection on the harm that we've done others and ourselves. But more important to me, it is a karmic inventory in the sense of seeing what habit patterns, what personality patterns, what behavior patterns, what thought patterns are revealed when I go back and trace my kind of addictive history. And so it's about learning who we are. And in terms of the long enduring mind, it means it gives us some perspective and shows us first what we need to work on, but also what we have to live with. Because in an inventory, there are certain things you see that, oh, I can change that. I need to change this behavior. And then there are certain things you see, oh, that's kind of a deeply conditioned habit pattern, like emotional pattern, that doesn't necessarily get uprooted just because I see it or I make an effort to change. So I would say that the connection is that it's revealing what the part that really connects to enduring. It reveals the things that can be painful that we have to learn to live with. I don't know. That's a guess. Just, I just make stuff up. This isn't like, do I have an audiobook? I do have an audiobook.
There's, if you scroll up the chat, there is Laura's text.
Yeah.
Do you see it?
The long one about.
Yeah. And so there's a question.
Yeah.
There.
It seems like the question is sort of about like America, which is a problem, no doubt. America is a problem. But, the other, my other piece on long enduring mind, I mean, now that I think of it, because my talks are spontaneous, I don't really plan a lot. If you look at the early Buddhist teachings, the suttas you mentioned in my bio that I'm drawing on them more these days, you see that pretty much everything that we see in our political sphere as well as our psychological sphere existed at the time of the Buddha. There were kings, there was not democracy, certainly. There was oppression, there was slavery, there was violence, war. And so I think it's important to see that what we're living in a moment in history that because we are in it, it seems overwhelming. But it's really just human history. And human history is the history of greed, hatred, and delusion. And we're in a cycle of that, which is particularly bad. But there have been many of these cycles. And so I think it's really important to keep that in perspective and realize this is painful and difficult, and I need to do what I can to make it a better world, whether that means political engagement or spiritual work or service, certainly to be engaged, but also to maintain this larger perspective that this is what human beings do. This is how human beings live. And we haven't figured out how to stop being driven by greed, hatred, and delusion. And it's painful. And that evokes that the spiritual response to pain is compassion, not fear, not anger, not running. It's compassion. And so that we really need to cultivate compassion, for everybody. And that's hard, especially with our enemies. It's hard to have compassion for Vladimir Putin. I don't have much compassion. I have a little piece of it because when I look at him, I see that he is a very small, a fearful man. He's also an evil man who's harming the world in serious ways. And I don't believe he should be allowed to get away with that. But I also understand, I keep this little piece over here in my brain that's like, yes, and he, like everyone else, is subject to dukkha. And so he is suffering. So that to me is the perspective I need on this world, which is so challenging. And to breathe and enjoy this day and this moment. And, after 20 years of darkness, yes, okay, you're in the light now. We'll use that image, and you're using that image. So we must enjoy what we can. This is all we have. If we live our whole lives in frustration and anger, that's what we get. So very hard. I mean, this is the challenge. That's why it's easier to be high, man. You think, it seems like easier, but I know, where does it lead us? It leads us to more dukkha. As I think Ajahn Chah, I don't know where this phrase comes from, but there is the suffering that leads to more suffering. And then there's the suffering that leads to the end of suffering. The path of recovery, the Dharma path, those include suffering that leads to the end of suffering. And I don't mean leads to down the way. It means that there is the potential right here and now for freedom from suffering, at least for moments,
Thank you. Then there's Jess is asking, would you give your perspective on impermanence or attachment and keeping a day, month, year count, or tracking how many days in a row we meditate, for instance? I find this challenging.
I'm not sure what Jess is finding challenging about it. But it's a good question in terms of attachment, in terms of, are we attached to how much time we have and how many days we've meditated, So I guess my view is, it's kind of like I talk about being addicted to meditation, right? Like, I'm a very habitual person, and I operate well. I like routines. So there's a downside to that, right? And of course, the addiction is the ultimate downside to that. but it can be used in a positive way, right? So to me, it's about trying to use attachment and routine or addictive personality to do something positive, to maintain a daily meditation practice. And if I'm a little obsessive, but I apply it to this positive thing, then I'm transforming that obsessiveness into something positive, because every quality that we can have, the astrologers out there know this, every quality we have can have a positive side, a positive manifestation, let's say a constructive manifestation or a less constructive manifestation. And it's not about, I'm going to become a different person. It's about, what are these qualities that I have? Can I use, and how can they manifest in useful and constructive ways, rather than being manifesting in unhelpful, destructive ways? Does that make sense?
Thank you. Then we have a couple of minutes. So this little question that we have, Monique has asked about the step 7. And again, not everybody here knows what the step 7 is.
Yeah.
But step 7 asks a higher power to take away our character defects. How do you think about this uprooting by asking from a Buddhist perspective? Okay, in baseball, there's a thing called teeing it up. You just put the ball right on a tee, and so thank you for teeing that up for me. That's right now. I've got a chapter, a couple of chapters on this topic, so I'll try to keep it, within the limits. So step 7, yes, says we humbly asked him to remove our shortcomings. So we kind of got to eject most of the words from that and get at, what are we saying? What I think that step is saying is, we took the karmic steps to change that. I'm going to look at my book, A Burning Desire, which has a quote that I want to read. It's a great book. Buy it. Oh, thank you. So this is what Ajahn Buddhadasa, who was a great Thai Buddhist master, said. From the Buddhist point of view, this is a matter of karma. We must act. That is, we must ask, seek, and knock for God to be moved. So mere faith is not enough. Even if one sits down to pray, it still will not be enough. In this context, the word ask implies an earnest effort to bring about a desired result. That is to say, we beseech the law of karma through our action and not merely with words. So when we humbly ask God to change, from a Buddhist viewpoint, we're humbly asking the law of karma. So what's that mean? Well, it means that we have to take the karmic action ourselves. We're the ones who initiate the change. There are 3 forms of karma: thoughts, words, and deeds. And so we have to operate on these 3 levels in order to have character defects. No, I'm sorry. No, that language is not helpful. In order for there to be transformation, we have to operate on these 3 levels. We have to look at our mind and see what we're thinking. And we have to learn to let go of the unskillful thinking and cultivate the more useful thinking. We need to watch our speech and see how we're using that in useful ways and not so useful ways. And then, of course, in our behavior. So this is how we change. The thing, in the 12-step model, we don't do it. It's not our will. And so there can be this sort of idea that it's a passive process. You just pray and it's, fixed. But that's not. There's nobody who goes to a 12-step program who just sits there and says prayers and thinks anything changes. People in 12-step programs, like every recovery program, are very active in doing their work. What I think oftentimes gets overlooked, though, and Buddhist recovery movement really, brings forward, is the mental part of it, is the meditative part.
although it's in the 12 steps, it's not emphasized. And the meditative part is the starting point. If we don't change our minds, our behavior is just sort of mechanical, but the mind is still festering with all the difficulties and pain. So it's about establishing those three forms of change, and then trusting that if we bring skillful intention to our thoughts, words, and deeds, that the outcome will ultimately be beneficial. Thus, the long enduring mind. To bring it back. Ba-dum-bum.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you so much. That was so helpful, like Maxine also says in the chat. Okay, so we will start wrapping up now. And a few words about Dana again. Your generosity can help to strengthen the recovery community and to grow the academy, and can be a practical expression of gratitude and metta. We invite you to practice generosity and to give Dana in support of these teachings, to be shared with our teacher and with the Buddhist Recovery Network. And there will be a link in the chat that will take you to the BRN website. And please, if you remember, indicate that your gift is for the academy. If you forget it, that's okay as well, because all the donations that come during this session are considered academy-based things. There will be also a lot of links in the chat in just a while. Me and Shauna are posting them. So if you want to stay a few minutes after, you can copy the links. And our next BRN Academy event is on Sunday, May the 7th, with Thomas Tran. And we have a Facebook group. We are going to post that link as well. And the Buddhist Recovery meetings, also link of that soon to the chat. But before that, thank you everybody for joining us today. May the merit we have gained go to the alleviation of the suffering of all beings. May we all be happy. May we all be peaceful. May we all be safe. So there will be links in the chat field, and we will keep the door open for a few moments.
Beautiful.
Thanks.
Thank you, Susanna. Thanks, Shauna. Thanks, everybody, for showing up for yourselves.
Thanks, Kevin, for coming.
Yeah.
It
Anytime.
was very helpful. It was very helpful. It was very useful.